So next up is the contemporary situational leadership theory, is the Hershey-Blanchard model. And this was often referred to as the situational leadership model. This was a huge thing in the 80s and the 90s. Hershey and Blanchard, quite frankly, made a lot of money being consultants and writing numerous books on the subject, and it was very well received by industry. People really liked this one. So it was very much like the earlier, or in the last chapter, where we talked about directing and delegating and picking the proper leadership style based on the follower. So again, the good part about this one is that you make assessment of the follower and adjust your leadership style accordingly. The critics will tell you this one is lacking an assessment of the situation. So you only look at the follower, not the situation. And many people will tell you that they call it a situational leadership theory model. And to them, the situation is the followers, basically the followers' competence, their ability, and their desire. And that's what you're assessing. So you're actually not assessing the situation. To go back to my earlier example about is it a complex problem where we have plenty of time to think it through and talk it through and have a very participatory style, or is it a fire and we got to give orders on what to do right now? So this model does not look at the situation like it claims. It looks at the follower, right? Which is fine. That's a big help as opposed to the one-size-fits-all model of leadership. By the way, I've had people at work tell me my group isn't performing very well because they do not fit my style of leadership. That's a terrible thing to say. It's a terrible thing to say about yourself, not about your group as a leader. My reaction, I had one of my leaders, one of my group leaders, tell me that when I was a manager, and I looked at him and I said, well, there's 11 of them and one of you. Guess which is easier to replace? I mean, I don't like to go around threatening people's jobs, but do not tell me your team of 11 isn't performing because they don't match up with your style of leadership. Go get a different style of leadership. Figure it out. Make it work. Right? That's an external locus of control. I'm failing because my team isn't used to my style of leadership. It's my team's fault. No, it is not. That team was doing a good job before you got there, and now you're there, they're not doing a good job. I'm pretty sure it's you. So figure it out. Solve it. Do not come to me and say it's the team's fault. That is not okay. And if it is the team's fault, it's still your fault because you're the leader. Fix the team. Right? So whether it's the team fault or it's your fault, it's your fault. It's real simple. It's like when the Navy says when a ship, right, when a naval ship in the U.S. Navy has a problem, they screw up, there's been a mistake or there's been incompetence or whatever, it's the captain's fault. It's always the captain's fault. They don't care if some teenager in the engine room did something stupid. It's the captain's fault. It's real simple. Everything goes on board the ship is a reflection of the captain. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the way they do it. All right, so let's look at the Hershey-Blanchard situational model, which again has to do with the follower, not the situation. But still, I really like this model. So in here we talk about the ability, the followers' readiness and their ability, right? So when they're first hired, like I talked about a new intern, they have very limited ability or no ability, but they have lots of willingness, right? So then we go with the telling approach. That's the directing leader. I'm going to show you what to do. Right here, do like I'm saying. All right, fine? Yeah, good. All right. Nice and simple. We keep it simple and they can handle it. All right, and then we go, and as they get better, as they get more ability, then we go to selling, right? We start selling. And before I showed you what I want you to do, now I'm going to tell you why I want you to do that. Here's why. Before I just said make sure this is a certain way. Now I'm going to tell you why. Because now you're more interested, you have more ability, and so to keep you motivated, you're going to learn not just what, but why. And then you'll understand the reasoning and you're more likely to do it. You're not doing it because it's a rule, you're doing it because there's a reason. Right? So I'm going to sell you on the idea of doing this thing. And then later, your participation kicks in, like we've talked about, right? You're becoming better and more, your ability goes up, so I start asking you more and more about what you might recommend, how should we do this, you figure out the best way to do this, all of that, right? And then just plain delegating, hey, you just go handle this. Or, I don't know, customer call with a problem, see what's up, right, and deal with it as you see fit. Because you're a veteran, you know how to do this kind of stuff, and I have a lot of trust in you. Right? And here's kind of a look at a graphical representation of this model. And here we see the followers' readiness down here and their behavior over here. So I would consider that their ability over here. So that's a look at the Hershey-Blanchard theory of situational theory, a leadership theory. I believe that's, yeah, it's copyright, right? You can see the copyright down here for situational leadership model. And so sometimes you'll hear people talk about the Blanchard-Hershey model because they don't want to violate the copyright on the situational leadership name. But this was a huge thing in industry for 20 years. Lots of managers know about this. They like it because it's prescriptive, right? It tells me what to do. It also just makes sense, right? I treat the veterans differently than I treat the rookies or the interns, and that also makes sense. And I was in a class where Hershey taught the class, and when I got my doctorate, and he said, "Oh, this is not a model we invented. This is the way people do it. We just figured it out and wrote it down and put a little graph on it and all of that." So he'll tell you too, we do this because this is the way people work effectively. This is the way good leaders do it. We just wrote it down as a model, which kind of makes sense. You don't want to invent a model, you want to document what works. Because why? Because it already works. So that makes sense to treat it that way. I thought that was pretty smart.